Week one reading summary. My apologies for getting this out to you so late. I didn't know that I was going to have to do it at all. So hopefully we'll get the book thing worked out quickly and you guys can read this rather than hearing my voice for 30 to 40 minutes. But anyway, let's go through this. And I know some of you already bought the books off Amazon. Please, please, please contact the school and make sure you get credit or refund, or maybe you can return those books. I don't know. So let's get going here with our week one reading summary. I'm going to try to highlight the things that I hoped you would get out of this week's reading assignment. So the first thing I want to point out is a quote that I really, really love. I've used it many, many times, and it's just because it is absolutely so true. And the quote is, in concept and reality are the same, but in reality, concept and reality are not the same at all. And I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this course, that what you're really trying to do is figure out what reality is and not just come up with this very elaborately constructed concept that has not been tested in the marketplace. Okay, so let's move on. What is entrepreneurship? Since we're talking about entrepreneurship, we need to ask the question, what is it? And most of the time when people think of entrepreneurship, the immediate folks that come to mind are the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Mark Cubans, a local celebrity, Sarah Blakely, very, very good female entrepreneur. She is the founder and CEO of Spanx. Elon Musk, who founded PayPal and ended up selling that, and then went on to found Tesla and SpaceX and several things. We've got Oprah Winfrey with Harpo Productions, and she went on to create an entire media empire, and it's one of the wealthiest women in the world. And she really is one of the trailblazers for female entrepreneurs. And then you've got the Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and some people think of the show Shark Tank. But yes, that is entrepreneurship. And most of those leaders are in the limelight, very charismatic personalities. But this is also entrepreneurship, right? You've got a franchise owner, operator. You've got somebody that starts a coffee company out of a food truck or mobile trailer. Maybe they start a corner coffee shop. You've got other entrepreneurs that are in construction trades and other trades and skill sets. All of this can be entrepreneurship. So don't just limit your mind to having to come up with something that hasn't ever been done before. All you really need to do is come up with an idea and a reason and do something well enough that the marketplace will justify you and reward you by paying you money. So that's put pretty simply. But the first thing we need to do is we need to talk about some myths versus facts of entrepreneurship. And in the introduction, Aulette points out there are 3 myths around entrepreneurship that we need to talk about and get out of the way. So the first one is individuals start companies. And while, yes, the idea may have come from one single person, but most successful startups, entrepreneurial entities started with a team. There are co-founders, there are multiple founders, and there's several reasons for this. We'll get into that deeper when we talk about putting your team together. And I'm kind of dating myself with this picture of Rambo up here, but he's somebody that came to mind because Rambo, if you go back and watch those old movies, one of the things you'll see is he really is a one-man militia. You could take Rambo and you could drop him off of a boat or out of a helicopter or airplane or whatever behind enemy lines. And Rambo was going to get it done and take care of the enemy or rescue the lady or whatever, and really didn't need any help from anybody. And this is just simply a myth. And I will tell you, you're going to make your life a lot harder if you try to carry the entire load by yourself. Myth number 2, only the charismatic are successful. And that's just simply not true. Think of the entrepreneurs that you know, business owners. You can think of plenty of folks that own businesses that started it from scratch, moved out of their basement or garage into thriving enterprise that are just everyday people. In fact, some of them may be very shy and don't want to be in front of the camera at all. And what Aulette points out in the book is that it's really more important than being charismatic. It's more important to be an effective communicator and recruiter and a salesperson. You need to know your market, be able to relate to the market, and be able to communicate your ideas successfully. And then myth number 3, is there an entrepreneurial gene? Are entrepreneurs born? And as much studying has been done on the topic, they have yet to find an entrepreneurial gene. Now, some people are more outgoing than others. Some are more reserved. Some people are more risk averse than others. But that has nothing to do with entrepreneurship. I've seen people that take big leaps like the Elon Musk, like the Richard Bransons, that fly in the face of conventional wisdom and somehow just will their idea to success. It's a little more complicated than that, but you get the idea. Then you've got other people that are extremely diligent. They've got a process and they're walking through that process, and they only take extremely calculated bets. What you will find is across the board is entrepreneurs are not as risk prone as you would think. Yes, they have to have a higher tolerance of risk than somebody else, much in the same way a commission only salesperson would be tolerant of risk. However, that risk tolerance comes from self-confidence. It also comes from an understanding of the market and believing that you understand the market well enough to succeed. But the bottom line truly is that entrepreneurship is a skill set. And Aulette points out that MIT is the perfect example of entrepreneurship can be caught and it can be taught. What do I mean by it can be caught? Well, if you're part of an organization that has a very entrepreneurial culture, then there's a lot of positive peer pressure to just become an entrepreneur. And this is the culture that they've created at MIT. They start over 900 startups per year. They've had over 25,000 over the years. These companies end up employing over 3 million people with aggregate annual revenues of close to $2 trillion. They've got a culture. There's almost an expectation that if you make it into MIT, you are going to be part of a startup either before you graduate or shortly thereafter. So that's what I mean by it can be caught. I mean, there's just an expectation and you just you get caught up in it and you believe that you can do it as well. What do I mean by it can be taught? Well, you're here in this course. There are some basic skill sets that need to be mastered. And so if you practice those, you're not afraid to fail and get back up and learn and move forward, you can learn how to be a successful entrepreneur. I don't care who you are, okay? So as we look at entrepreneurial enterprises, Aulette points out that they tend to fall into 2 primary buckets. So the first one is the small and medium enterprise. Some people call this the SMB, Sierra Mike Bravo. Small and medium enterprise. What are we talking about? This is the local hair salon. This is the home health services. This is the local auto shop. These tend to be very localized, and these are services that are not going to get offshored. And we can talk more about these. Okay, so this is the small to medium enterprise. The other bucket that entrepreneurial endeavors tend to fall into is the innovation-driven enterprise. What do we mean by that? Well, there tends to be some new technology or some new process that's been innovated, or a new application of existing technology. There tends to be protectable intellectual property beyond just trademarks. There's actually patentable concepts and ideas and applications. And this is that innovation-driven enterprise. And so as we look at how these break down, your SME entrepreneurship tends to focus on local and regional markets. Part of that is because many of these are very labor intensive, or require a tremendous amount of marketing, or maybe the product delivery is very local or regional in their reach. Innovation is not necessary to growth, or and it's also sometimes not even considered a competitive advantage. If you're going to innovate in these types of businesses, most often it is around how you package the product or service from a pricing or maybe even a delivery standpoint. You have primarily non-tradable jobs. So these are jobs generally performed locally. So restaurants, dry cleaners, service industries. These are things that cannot be offshored, right? You can't offshore your plumber. You can't offshore an electrician. You can't offshore the mechanic, right? You can't offshore home health. Now we're starting to see some of this with telemedicine, but at the end of the day, somebody has to be there to care for the client, the patient, in their home or at the facility. A lot of times these are family businesses, very little external capital oftentimes brought into the business to get it off the ground. And what you'll find is they're profitable almost from day one. So think of the example of a plumber. You've got a guy that is working for somebody else, becomes a master plumber, and through that process, he decides that, you know, I think I can do this better. I'd like to start my own company. So he leaves, and provided he's already got all his own tools and a truck, he can go out there and he is netting profit off that very first customer. And the companies typically grow because of that at a very linear rate. And those organizations, those enterprises respond very well and quickly in a positive manner to an infusion of capital. Okay, so now let's look at the innovation-driven enterprise. Global regional markets. A lot of times you are doing innovation that solves much larger problems. There's applications on a global scale. Sometimes you have to go globally just because you need a market that large to make this work. The company is based on some sort of innovation. Maybe it's tech, maybe it's a business process or a business model, and it creates some sort of potential competitive advantage. And that's very, very key, you know, when we get to about 2 or 3 more bullets down. Tradable jobs. These are jobs that don't necessarily have to be performed locally. These are things that can be delivered electronically. Think of your software as a service models, right? Gmail, Microsoft Office 365, these types of things. More diverse ownership base, including a wide array of external capital providers. And the company will typically start by losing money if you look at the revenue curve. But if it's successful, it ends up having exponential growth. That's that hockey stick that you see in a lot of the business plans that are out there. Because of that, it is going to require investment. I mean, you've got to close this gap right here, so that you can make it to the point of profitability. You have to be able to hire people. So oftentimes this involves the raising of capital. So Alet organizes the content into 24 steps. He organizes this into 24 steps. So let's dive into these right quick. The first one is, who is your customer? And making sure that you really know who your customer is. I talk to and work with so many businesses, and you would not believe how many businesses that have been around for a while and they're struggling just to get traction or to experience growth. And a lot of times it's because they don't really understand who their customer is. All right, then it's, what can you do for your customer? Once you understand who they are and their needs, you can figure out, what can we do? And then, how does your customer acquire your product? What channels are you going to deliver this through? And then, how do you make money off your product? Do you have a sound revenue model and cost structure? Because if the business can't make money, it doesn't matter how much you sell. You've got to be profitable. And remember, even if you're planning on launching a nonprofit is a tax classification. It is not a business model. Okay, how do you design and build your product? How do you design and put together your services? You may think this doesn't apply to you. Maybe you're going to do a salon. Well, how do you design your salon? What is that client experience like? What services are you going to be offering? And then, how do you scale your business? Are you just going to have a single salon? Even if you have a single salon, are you going to have multiple stylists? How do you make sure your clientele receive a consistent experience across different stylists or across multiple locations? Okay, so these 6 themes over these 24 steps are extremely important. And these 24 steps are going to stack the deck in your favor in your success. Now, they don't mean you're going to have success. They don't mean your idea is going to make it all the way through. It's not a bad thing if you wash out your idea before you get to step 24. The process did its job. It saved you a lot of tears, a lot of sleepless nights, and likely many thousands of dollars. And as somebody that's been there, done that, I can tell you that's not a fun thing to do. The other thing I want to caution you, Alet points out in this book, it's primarily targeted at the innovation-driven enterprise. And while that is true to some extent, that doesn't mean you're not going to get any benefit out of these steps if you are thinking of an enterprise or an idea that's more in that SME arena. Okay, so these 24 steps are great. We're going to go now, and we are going to look at number 1. So before we get to number 1, I want to talk about 3 ways to get started. How do you even come up with your idea for an enterprise? Well, the first thing is you have an idea. Maybe you see a need or a process that can be better. You just, something strikes you and you go, man, this would be great. Another thing, you might have a technology. You stumble across a new application for something that already exists, or maybe you just discover a new way to do something that is a breakthrough, and you want to capitalize on that. So this is different from an idea in that this typically involves a patent versus just trade secrets and trademarks. And then the third thing is maybe you have a passion. You just simply would love to be able to do whatever it is all the time and be able to have more control over your schedule. Now, I want to caution you, entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. And you're going to put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of hours before you get to that point where, you see the Richard Bransons and the Mark Cubans and those guys lounging But you can get there. You can get there. And if you build your organization correctly, even an SME can get to that point to where you actually have a tremendous amount of freedom and options with your schedule and with your finances. So let's talk about something that's extremely important. I want to go back to that myth that entrepreneurship is a solo endeavor, right? We already debunked that myth. It's not. You have a much higher success rate if you have a team with you, if you have co-founders. That's been proven time and time and time again. But how do you go about picking your team? If you've looked ahead and gotten a preview where you've seen the pitch deck that you're going to have to put together, one of the slides in there, your investors are going to be looking, your bankers are going to be looking, is picking your team. And even if you don't need to go out and raise capital from investment, you are still likely going to need to have a line of credit from your bank to fund your growth and to cover cash gaps that inevitably happen as you are doing work in advance of clients paying you. Okay, so a lot of this goes back to your revenue model, but growth requires capital. And the people that are going to give you that capital want to see that you have the ability to put together a team, and also that you know where your weaknesses are, and you have the ability to pick a team that will shore up those areas of your weakness. There is a great framework called the Competing Values Framework that came out of research from the University of Michigan by Kim Cameron and Robert Quinn. And this is a great framework. You can Google that. It's called the Competing Values Framework. Again, that's Kim Cameron and Robert Quinn, University of Michigan. And then there's another book that hits on this called Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman and Mark Winters. And I'm actually going to show you some of these resources now. I've made a PDF of this slide deck so you can go back and you can look this up. The first three are articles, and I confirm that those links are still there. So Paul Graham, what we look for in founders. Now, this is coming from a venture capital perspective, right? What are they looking for in a founder's team? Margaret Heffernan, want to start a business. First, find a partner. Okay. The big thing is we've all got blind spots, and we need somebody to help us see those blind spots that'll create positive tension within the business, constructive criticism, another perspective. You don't want somebody that thinks everything that comes out of your mouth is the greatest idea in the world. You want somebody that'll challenge that, and then you can challenge back, and you can still get along and have that dialogue. And at the end of the day, you can come to a constructive decision. And then how to find that special someone, your co-founder, a GeekWire article from April 8th, 2012, and then Rocket Fuel from 2016. I've used this Rocket Fuel book with several clients, because one of the challenges they had is the founder was, or the CEO was, getting pulled into things that they were not best equipped to do. And sometimes that was the operational parts of the business. Other times that was the visionary part of the business. And so by pairing somebody with that complement, you can really, really move a business along. I mean, Jobs had Wozniak, and you see that, right? Jobs is the visionary, Woz was the guy that made it happen. And so you need that team. All right, I think we've made that point. Let's move on to step one. Okay, step one. So step one is market segmentation. What do we mean by market segmentation? Well, you need to identify who your market is. Now, let's go back to the hair salon example. You may say, but Chris, I'm doing a hair salon. Everybody's got hair, and so everybody's my customer. What do you mean by market segmentation? Well, everybody is not your customer. So think about a Great Clips or a Supercuts or whatever, okay? Everybody's not even their customer. Not everybody wants to go in and have an $8 or $16 haircut. Some people like the full salon experience. They pay much more than that, and they don't think that they are getting good value if they're paying less than that. The other thing is you can only serve a certain geography. People will only travel so far to have their hair done. And then by identifying the market that you're targeting, you can also define what services you need to offer in your salon. So market segmentation is very, very important. And I want you to get out of your mind right now the concept that everyone is your customer. First and foremost, you can't and don't have the resources to be all things to all people. Not even Apple, with their billions and billions of dollars, tries to be all things to all people. They are who they are. They understand their target market, their primary market, and you're either in or you're out. It either works for you or it doesn't. And it works for enough people that they have a viable business model. So determine where you can dominate and dominate, okay? So start thinking about what market segment you're going to go after. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. Because the single determining factor is that until someone who's not related to you and isn't just buying out of sympathy is willing to pay real money for your product or service, you don't even have a business, okay? And the key to a sustainable business is getting enough customers to pay you so that your revenues not only exceed your expenses, but also so that the business is throwing off enough cash to meet your lifestyle goals. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, so as we start to think of market segments, one of the things I need to point out as well, and I'll points this out in the book, is there are complex markets. Okay, so you think of the direct sale thing, you know, just a simple retailer. Somebody walks in, they have what you want, they pay you money, they walk out. That is a primary customer. Okay. Complex markets either have two customer segments or they have primary and secondary customers. Now, a lot more businesses fall into complex markets than what you might think. So let's tackle with some of the obvious ones first. Let's talk about two multiple client constituencies, two clients, right? Two-sided markets is what these are called. So you think about Uber. Uber has drivers. That's one market, right? They have to be attractive. They have to have an attractive offering to attract drivers, because without drivers, they can't attract their other market, which are who? The riders, exactly. So this is a two-sided market, and Uber doesn't work unless it appeals equally to both. Think of Airbnb, think of eBay, right? eBay doesn't work unless there's things on there for people to buy. Airbnb doesn't work unless there's it's attractive to the property owners and it's attractive to somebody that wants to rent that particular property. You think about it even in more traditional markets, such as just the real estate market, both commercial and residential, right? You've got to have somebody that either wants to sell or lease their property, and then you have to have buyers or prospective tenants for those same properties, okay? So there's a lot more two-sided markets than you would think, and it's a pretty common scenario. And so you may have, with what you're thinking in your idea seed, a two-sided marketplace, and you need to understand who your targets are within each of those. You need to segment. You want to get very narrow, okay? Other businesses, such as home health or any business targeting children, education, and many B2B businesses have what's known as primary and secondary customers. So this is another way. Why do I say business targeting children? Go back to your hair salon, okay? Even a Supercuts, they cut a lot of kids' hair. Well, who's the primary customer? Well, the primary customer is the child getting their hair cut. Who's the secondary customer? Oh, the secondary customer is that parent that needs to be satisfied with the result because they're paying the bill. And any business that caters to children, Chuck E. Cheese, for instance, Horrible example, but it's perfect. And they finally figured out, well, maybe, I don't know. They at least got passable pizza at some point. But you had to have pizza at least decent enough for the parents to hang out and tolerate the chaos, because their primary customer was actually who? It was the children. Okay. You think of home health. Home health. Your primary customer is who? The patient. Who are your secondary customers? The family members that need to feel comfortable and confident in that care. And sometimes it's the family members that are paying the bill. Okay, so why do I say most B2B businesses have what's known as primary and secondary customers? I'm part of one of these right now. And so we are a low voltage contractor, and we do everything from conference rooms to concert halls. And when we're talking to our corporate customers, we've always got, typically it's the chief technology officer now, and that is our primary customer. Okay, now our end users are even further down the food chain, right? These are the people using those meeting rooms. Sometimes that's even the CEO. Okay, now our secondary customer are the people making the financial decisions that have to give budgetary approval to our primary customer's decision. So you really have to understand your markets very, very well. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful. And this is a link to a great graphic and article with some questions that you want to be sure you ask, and explaining the difference in more detail between a primary and secondary core customer. Because that is, again, you have to know your customer. So how do you do a market segmentation? Because that's what you're going to start doing right now. You need to be thinking about this. I know we're just at the idea seeds phase, but you need to start thinking this through, because it's not the easiest process. You really have to put your detective hat on, and you are going to be looking for clues. You need to focus on the end users, not necessarily the customers. What do I mean by that? You need people who need what you have. So the example in the text was a school and educational technology. So you might think, well, schools are my customers. Well, not really. Who uses the educational technology? Well, it's the teachers, right? Those teachers use the educational technology. So you may say, okay, great. I am good to go. I have identified my market segment. I'm going to focus on teachers. Well, not so fast, not so fast. You need to just make some more decisions. So is your technology going to be focused at primary, secondary, or undergraduate or graduate level education? Is it going to focus in the public market or the private market? Public education or private education? Okay. All these questions have to be answered. Are you going to focus on a specific region? Are you going to focus in urban markets? Or are you going to focus in rural markets? Because those marketplaces have different needs. So you really, really have to start narrowing this down. Some other questions that were in the text that you can ask to help narrow down your market is the target customer well funded? Now, if you are doing a nonprofit, if you've got something that's more of an altruistic endeavor, maybe you've got a new technology for building homes very inexpensively or treating water. Okay, there are a lot of markets where no, the target customer is not well funded. Well, now you've just set yourself up where you've got a primary and a secondary customer. Okay, who's your primary customer? Well, in the beginning, your primary customer are going to be the ones that you need to get the money from so that you can go serve the end users, right? Get your technology out there in practice. And then at some point that may flip once you get enough adoption into the marketplace. But you're still going to have to, even if you're a nonprofit, you have two constituencies that you have to keep happy, and sometimes a third one. We're part of a project in some countries right now where the government is a constituency that we have to make sure we're keeping happy as well. So be thinking about that. So is the target customer well funded? And the target customer may not always be the obvious one, okay? Is the target customer readily accessible to your sales force? Now, remember, you're not going to have much of a sales force at this point. Your sales force is primarily you and your co-founders, okay, which could be one other person. If you are a particularly introverted person, very shy, hesitant to even pick up the phone and make a call, you need to have a co-founder that's a little bit more gregarious and outgoing, because you need to go out there and have direct access to your target customer, especially during the startup phase. It is so critically important to deal directly with your customer when you're starting out, rather than relying on third parties, because your product or your service is going to go through iterations, and you need to refine this, and you don't need to have extra noise or fluff or haze. You don't need anything diluting that message coming directly from those end users. You need that critical feedback. It is so crucial at this stage. You want to deal directly with them. So is your target customer readily accessible to your sales force? You may have a product that you want to sell to Fortune 500 companies. Well, okay, unless you've got those relationships already, you're probably not going to get there. You need to pick a different market to get started out. Okay. 3, does the target customer have a compelling reason to buy? Would the customer buy your product instead of something else? Is it better than what's already being used? Remember, sometimes your biggest competition, especially if you've got something that the marketplace has never heard of or seen before, not just your business, right? If you open up a new salon, people make some assumptions of what it is, okay? But if you've got something brand new, truly innovative, one of your biggest competitors is going to be doing nothing, right? The customer can just choose to do nothing and just kind of see where things go. Is this technology or innovation going to hang around, or is it going to go away? And that really is challenging. We've got a software security product that in the very, very, very beginning, that was our biggest challenge, was the client just choosing to do nothing. And in our case, it was actually not because they didn't need the product. Oh, they absolutely needed it. And the price point was extremely attractive. But in order to buy our product, they would have to admit that there was an issue with what they had been doing all along. So don't discount the psychological factors that are going on as you're trying to get your product into the marketplace. Okay. Number 4, can you today, with the help of partners, you can have vendor partners, you can have other founding partners, deliver a whole product? Again, in our low voltage company, we got sent a product, we saw the product, we were very intrigued by it. It solves a very, very real gap in our technology toolbox right now. Love to have it. It would be fantastic. We saw the demo. The demo looked brilliant. We were excited. They shipped us two demo units. The packaging, very Apple-esque, right? Which, Apple has now set the standard for packaging products, and very impressive packaging, very clean design on the product itself. We go to plug it in, and it is not stable enough for us to keep running for 5 minutes, much less, have something that's going to create a trouble-free experience for our clientele. Okay, so Do you have what it takes to pull off, to deliver on the promise that you're making the marketplace? Okay. 5, is there entrenched competition that could block you? Do not underestimate this one. I'll go back to our software security company. You can have a superior product. You can have your target customer, your end user, admit to you that you have a superior product. But unless you can overcome number 3, you are not going to move your product. And sometimes that number 3 is very interesting. Okay, it's very interesting. So with this particular product, we're a new entry into the marketplace back when we first came out with it. Okay, now it's had some time in the marketplace and there's a list of clientele. So it's a lot easier to sell that product today than it was when we were getting started. But you have to think about, you have to put yourself in your target customer's shoes, right? Because they are risking something by doing business with you as a brand new enterprise, whether you're selling a product or a service, right? And so would you be willing to put your career on the line to use your product or service, to recommend it to your boss and the powers that be? And this is what we came up against. We got told time and time again we had a superior product, yet it was easy for them to, even if something happened, even if they had a security breach or whatever, they could stand in front of their board, and because these other products had name recognition and brand recognition, they felt a lot more secure. It's the reason people hire Accenture and Deloitte and these huge consulting firms. There are many boutique firms that can do a much better job, are much less expensive. But at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, you can stand there and you can say, well, we hired Deloitte. Well, we hired Accenture. I mean, what else could we have done? We got IBM. And people are going to look and they're going to go, yep, you're right. I don't know what we could have done any different. We hired the best. So don't discount entrenched competition. You can have a superior product. You can have your target customer admit that you have a superior product, but you still have to overcome number 3 in order to get that into the marketplace. It is not easy to displace an entrenched competitor, an incumbent. Number 6, if you win this segment, can you leverage it to enter additional segments? And this is very, very important. Now you might say, well, Chris, a minute ago though, you said that you need to get narrow and you need to focus and you can't be all things to all people. And now it kind of sounds like you're contradicting yourself. Let me explain this a little more. So as you start to dial in your service offering or product to your target customer, one of the things that you're going to start to notice is, hey, this actually translates with not very much tweaking to other market segments. Now, the tendency is to want to jump over there right away. And here's the problem. We already said it. You do not have enough financial resources or hours in the day to attack on multiple market fronts. Okay, you've got to stay narrowly focused and drive depth and become the expert in that initial segment. And then you can actually leverage that to go enter new markets. And many times you will be able to enter those new markets by getting referrals from the folks that were in your primary market, your starting market. So be thinking about that as well. And then finally, is the market consistent with the values, passions, and goals of the founding team? Okay, So you've got to think about what the goal of the business is. Okay, is this a lifestyle business? Is this something we want to take public so we can exit? Regardless, you need to always begin with the end in mind, right? Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So begin with that end in mind. You always need to be building your company with exit in mind. Am I creating marketplace value not only for my customers, but am I creating marketplace value within the business itself, so that if something happened to me, you know, I can sell this business and that there is value in this business. I've got a business that I'm in the process of trying to buy right now that has been out there for many years. And I know the owner is going to be very disappointed in what the market value of that business is, but that is what it is. And you need to always be thinking about, am I building value in the business in addition to making sure you serve your customers? But you also want to be sure that the market is consistent with the values and the goals of that founding team. So if you've got some partners that are, they want to build this thing, they want to go for the moon, go big or go home, and then you've got others that are just trying to create a small lifestyle business. Well, you've got a misalignment there, and so you need to either change the founders or you need to change what market you're going after. Okay. So the other thing is, if you are looking to go public and exit that way or get acquired by a larger company, it's a very common strategy, because going public is not the easiest thing to do, and it's not inexpensive either. So a good exit strategy is to build something that's attractive and will get acquired by a bigger entity. And that happens all the time. So that impacts you. How do we have our revenue model set up? Are we going after markets that are going to be compatible with our potential acquirers? How do we have our operations set up? Do we have systems that are going to translate easily? So that's a big one as well. Okay, so now let's move on to the last one. And I thank you for hanging in there with me. We're almost done. So primary market research. And again, I go back to, if you are not somebody that's comfortable with this, well, then you need to have a founding partner that is, or you need to have a buddy that will just help you out of the goodness of their heart with this, because you do not want to outsource this. You just simply can't. The information that you're going to get is way too valuable, and you need to think like an investigative reporter. Go visit with those end users, potential customers, both primary and secondary. You are not going to get everything you need to know from Google. This is going to take time, but it will potentially save you thousands of dollars. You've got to have that high level of intellectual curiosity. You got to be fearless about getting on the phone, in the car, on a plane. You got to go pursue this information. And when you're in front of that potential customer, right? This is your target market. So don't even think of them as a customer at this point. When you're in front of your target market or your target end user, if you're talking more than you're listening, you are doing it wrong. Also remember, you're not there to sell them. You're there to propose some ideas to them and get their feedback on those ideas and how would that solve their need. And then if it won't, ask them, maybe you've misidentified the need. Maybe there's a bigger need, right? Maybe there's some other things. Maybe they, kind of like our software product. Yeah, it absolutely solves the need, but here's this other thing over here that's in the way, and you need to solve this problem for me before I can buy your product. This other problem over here that is not even related to your product. You've got to be open-minded. So never, ever, ever, ever defend your idea, right? You're there to gather information. You're there to just gather facts, information, inquiry, not advocacy, okay? And you need to make the time for it. Remember, you don't have the answer for your potential customers and their needs. You're doing market research, and these customers don't have the answer for you. You're just there to gather data so that you can determine what's the right offering, okay? Yeah, and just listen to what they have to say and don't try to get them to buy anything, okay? Now, once you get all this together, you're going to want to organize that research. You're going to want to list out your end users. You want to understand what is their decision-making unit? How do they make their decisions? If you're in the SME space, maybe this is pretty straightforward. My decision-making unit is me. I decide I want to get my hair cut, and I go. But you know, don't underestimate the power of peer groups and social circles either. And then application. What would they be using your product or service for, and would they be using it in the way that you expect, right? Or the benefits that they're going to get out of this, what you expected them to be. And then who are the most influential customers, right? Who are the thought leaders that these end users that you're interviewing look to help them make their decisions? Because remember, everybody really, at the end of the day, people are looking to protect themselves. You know, they're looking to protect themselves, but they're either to protect their job or protect their appearance, protect their home, their family, their pocketbook, okay? Market characteristics. What is there anything about this market that would help or hinder the adoption of new technology? What partners and players do you need to create alliances with, or vendors that you need? And how many potential customers are there really? And who are the real competitors in that market? And then maybe, you know, what complementary assets are required? I'll give you a good story about this, and then we'll wrap it up. So Sony were actually the first ones to come out with the MP3 player, not the iPod. And then there were several other offerings of MP3 players before the iPod ever arrived on the scene. And the MP3 player, the little portable MP3 player, really didn't get a whole lot of market traction. There were some early adopters, and then it just kind of stalled out. But it was Apple and Steve Jobs that realized that you needed to create an entire ecosystem so that people could purchase music legally and easily and get it on that device. And that's what they did, and that's why they dominated the market. So maybe there's some complementary assets that are going to be required in order to get the full solution that you're trying to offer. Okay, so that's it for this week. Thanks for hanging in there and sticking with me. And hopefully those books will be there soon, and we won't have to keep doing this week after week. I know you don't, you got better things to do than listen to my voice for an hour. But I appreciate your attention, and I hope this was helpful, and you can apply this to the other assignments. Thanks so much, and always send me a message, C. Reese at Brenau.edu if you have any questions or concerns on the content or any assignments. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.